أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا سيدنا ومولانا بالقاسم مصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدنا مولانا أمير المؤمنين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتاب المبين وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, my dear youth, my brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray all of you are doing well, inshallah. I pray your fasts are going well and that these days are filled with joy, filled with happiness, and most importantly, filled with reflection. And yet again, it is a reminder that this is definitely a month for us to get closer to the holy book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting closer to the holy Quran. And we said that though it is very important and though there is a lot of thawab to be earned with doing a khatam of the Quran, it is also important for us to get closer to the Quran this month by understanding the Quran. And this can be through many different forms, whether it is going to the appropriate lectures or sources to understand the tafsir of the Quran, whether that may be improving your makhraj, your pronunciation of the Quran, or whether that be through understanding the language of the Quran, being well versed, or enrolling yourself into classes or lessons which are helping you to understand Arabic, which furthermore can help you to understand the meaning of the Quran, and also being well versed in Arabic to understand the ahadith of our A'imma alayhi salatu wassalam. Recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Today marking the 4th day of the holy month of Ramadan. In our previous 3 lectures, we were addressing the topic of why it's important for the youth to fast, especially living in the West. What are some practical benefits that they're going to gain from fasting? And inshallah, we're attempting to slowly unveil the type of benefits that they will achieve from fasting, spiritually and also practically. We said that the beginning for every action has a base. That base is the niyyah. And for fasting, we said that if your niyyah is pure and your niyyah is sincere, then your experience in fasting will also be sincere and pure. And this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for from us in the holy month of Ramadan. And we also touched upon the concept of self-discipline, how self-discipline is very important for your growth and how it will allow you to be more organized and as an individual and also get through any hardships in your life. We also discussed the topic of perseverance, of how fasting helps us not only to abstain from food and water, even though we might want it and we might crave it. It also helps us through that process to persevere through any hardships that come in our life, and inshallah to overcome that because we have practiced in the month of Ramadan this very important characteristic trait of perseverance. And we said that all of these traits are going to be connected together in some way or another. They're not just going to be random traits that we're going to be throwing around and discussing. We're going to see that how they help you to grow as a human being and how it's important to connect and to manifest all of these traits together in order for you to grow as a human being. And the actual maqsad of that, the actual intention of that is to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So today we're going to be talking about Yet again, a very important characteristic trait that has to do with and that is connected directly with the traits that we talked about before, like self-discipline, like patience, like consistency, like perseverance. And that topic or that characteristic trait is self-control. All right. We hear about self-control all the time. You know, have self-control over your anger, have self-control over your lust, have self-control over your hunger, your thirst, your desires, right? And those are very important aspects, but we're going to go a bit into depth of how we can practically manifest this characteristic trait of self-control. So we learned that from fasting, very evidently, you've made that pure niyyah that you're fasting to do it for qurbatan ilallah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So automatically when you have the intention, you know that there are certain things that you need to abstain from on a very surface level, which is what? Food, water, and, you know, sins and those lustful desires. This automatically leads to what? Self-control, right? Once you have that niyyah and you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're ultimately going to have that trait of self-control. That what? I need to have self-control, that if I see some food in front of me, I need to stay away from that. If I see water in front of me and I'm craving water, I need to stay away from that. If there's this sin that I used to do before, and in the month of Ramadan, that sin is very apparent to me, or I'm leaning towards that sin, then I need to have self-control. Why? Because it is based off my intention that is filled with purity and sincerity. So, yet again, once you have self-discipline, once you have that patience, once you have that consistency, we're going to see later on in this session how self-control will also come into play, inshallah. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So to put it in the practical example that we've been using quite consistently within these past sessions is that of working out, right? We want to make sure that our body is fit. We want to make sure that we're healthy. We want to make sure we're getting that exercise. So we said that when you exercise, when you work out, you have that intention, that is that base, that inshallah, I'm going to work out and I'm going to get my body into a very healthy position, inshallah. Later on, that's going to require you, as we discussed before, that's going to require you to have that self-discipline, right? So once you have that self-discipline, you're going to make sure that you're organized. You want to make sure that you're getting a balanced diet. You're going to make sure that you're going to be going to the gym, you know, whether it's 3, 4, 5 times a week, whatever it is. You're going to make sure that your schedule with working out and the type of workouts that you get when you're working out are effective, right? This will also necessitate that you need to stay away from certain foods. You need to stay away from certain liquids. You need to stay away from certain diets, and you need to stay away from certain habits. Like what? Like a lack of sleep, right? When you need to stay away from these type of things, there's a characteristic trait that is being manifested over here. What is that? That is none other than self-control, right? So ultimately what we want to do is we want to tie it back to our fasting experience in Ramadan. That, you know, if you're able to have that self-control from staying away from food, from water, and your you know, desires that are, you know, they're sinful desires, you will ultimately be practicing this character trait of self-control, right? And self-control as youth is very important, because once you reach that stage of bulugh, you're going to realize that the body changes, right? Your desires change. The way your mind works, it changes as well. It's a very beautiful stage as well, but it can also be very dangerous if you don't know how to control it, right? If you don't know how to have that control over your temptations. This is why it's important to have that righteous guidance, right? And obviously it can be through a life coach. It can be through a religious scholar who is guiding you, right? But ultimately, this is the age where your body mentally and physically is going to be going through a lot of changes. So at this age, you want to make sure that you're able to get a grasp of this characteristic of self-control. One of the biggest examples that we have in the Quran from the stories of our Anbiya is that of Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salam. All right. Many of you have read Surah Yusuf, and many of you know the circumstances that Prophet Yusuf had to go through as well. All right. So Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was brought into Misr or Egypt at that time, he was living under the Pharaoh, right? And the Pharaoh's wife was who? Zulaykha. And it is obviously mentioned in the Quran that Yusuf alayhi salam, he was a youth at that time, right? but he was also very handsome, right? He had very thick and, very luscious hair. He had very beautiful eyes. He had a very white face. He was very, he was very handsome. He was a beautiful youth, right? And we see that in the Quran that there was an incident where Zulaykha was tempting Yusuf alayhi salam for an indecent act, right? And it says over here in chapter number 12, so Surah Yusuf, verse number 23, that and she Zulaykha, in whose house he was, Yusuf, sought to seduce him, right? To lead him into negative temptation. She closed the doors and said, "Come, you." He said, "I seek refuge of Allah. Indeed, he is my master who has made good my residence. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed." Now, subhanAllah, this is a very important lesson for us. Why? Not for all, no doubt is for all of us, but is also for the youth. Why? Because at that time, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was a youth as well, right? And yes, he's a prophet, he's guided by Allah as well, but that does not necessarily mean that temptations are not going to come onto the prophets. The reason why they're prophets, the reason why they're so close to Allah is because they have that self-control within that, they have that self-discipline within them. And all those characteristics combined is what leads to a strong iman. Once you have that strong iman, you're going to have that taqwa, right? You're going to have that God consciousness, that God is watching you in all circumstances. He's watching you in every place and every time. And this is exactly what we see with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, that because Yusuf alayhi salam was so handsome, Zulaykha was trying to seduce him, right? But because of this self-control that he had over his temptations, yet again, he's a youth. At this time, the body goes through many changes. There are many desires, lustful desires that youth want to carry out. But Yusuf alayhi salam is one of the biggest examples of how we can have that self-control. That he, having that taqwa and knowing that God is watching him all over the place, he says, "Indeed, he is my master who has made good my residence. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed." All right, so he knows that God is watching him, right? And he knows that this act in itself is, indecent and is not, and is looked down upon from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So yet again, that self-control in that example, right, is self-control over indecent act, over those lustful temptations, and from those sins for youth, because we know that when a youth goes through the process of bulugh, a lot of changes go through their body mind, as we said, and that can lead to a lot of consequences, right? But it's important for us to get that right guidance in order for us to have those self-control over our temptations, inshallah. And another big example that we want to discuss self-control in is that with studying, right? A lot of us are in university, high school, primary school, we're in university. Studying is a very big part of it, right? And as we mentioned before in that story, if you guys remember, of my teachers and the ulama that were downstairs in the library, I kept taking breaks, but they were in that same position, studying, concentrating, not being distracted. We said the root of that is self-discipline, right? And because they had that self-discipline, they were able to have that self-control to not be distracted by anything else. And that's something very important for us, right? Because I feel like here in our university systems, we're studying just for the grade. And because of that, it's not really motivating, right? It can get really discouraging that I'm only studying this textbook just to pass, get this grade, finish university, get a good job, and that's it, right? And because of that, we can get distracted a lot. And this is why it's important to really study and really pursue what you feel like you're really passionate about, right? Make that rational decision before you get into university, so that you want to make sure that when you're studying something, you're not easily distracted in that process of studying for it, right? So the root of that, of being concentrated while you're studying or researching or getting your work done, is self-discipline. That self-discipline will able to, allow you to have that self-control. That, hey, while I'm studying, I need to make sure that I organize my study breaks. I also organize the time that I need to study, right? So I need to, for example, finish 5 chapters in, let's say, 3 hours, for an example, right? So during those 3 hours, your self-control and your self-discipline will allow you to organize that time for your breaks and also for your studying in a very efficient manner, inshallah. But another aspect to that studying is that sometimes we might get distracted, but sometimes we also might burn ourselves out, right? A lot of people believe that, okay, if I pull out all-nighters for a week, if I study like 12 hours a day without any sufficient breaks, not a good diet, I'm not eating properly as well, I'm not getting proper sleep, then, I'm going to be successful in my studies. That can actually, go against your benefit. And I witnessed that in Hosa, because just a personal story, when I was there, I felt like it was so overwhelming because there's so many things that you need to study, because knowledge is infinite, right? Knowledge is infinite. You can never get enough of knowledge. You can never say that I have all the knowledge, or that I'm done studying. It's not like that. And because of that mentality, it became so overwhelming. So this is not something to say out of pride, because it's definitely something that took a toll on me. It had an impact on me, mentally and physically, that because there's so much to study, I would just, lock myself in that room, in the study room, and just study like 10, 11, 12 hours a day. But at the end of the day, even if I was spending that much time with my books, how much of that was I really retaining, right? Because what was I sacrificing? I was sacrificing getting a proper diet, right? Drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, having enough breaks, socializing properly, going out and playing sports. I used to love playing basketball. When I went to Qum, I just felt like I didn't have enough time. Why? Because I was burning myself out. So therefore, when you have self-discipline and when you have self-control, you're also going to realize that you'll be able to efficiently organize your schedule to a place where you know how to reach your goals successfully and efficiently, right? And that will allow you to keep away from burning yourself out, because burning yourself out, right, means that you're not going to be able to retain anything, right? What's the point of burning yourself out and studying until 3-4 in the morning, and then you wake up and you miss your class the next day? What's the point of that studying, right? Because when you're in class and you're in front of your teachers, right, that direct experience is the knowledge. That's I think there's a statistic about this, if I'm not mistaken, that when you're actually in class, 70 or 60% of what you're going to retain, inshallah you can confirm, 70 or 60% of what you retain is actually in that classroom, from the experience, that direct experience with your teacher. So yet again, with studying, it's important that you have your self-control so that you're not distracted. You have that self-discipline, that self-control, so that you're not burning yourself out, right? You know yourself better than anyone else, right? You know how you need to efficiently study. You know when you need your breaks. So inshallah, you need to focus on that self-control so that you make sure you're not being distracted, right? And also to make sure you're not burning yourself out, inshallah. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Another big example of this, inshallah, as our youth, we want to start working as well part-time, right? Or whatever it is. We want to get that experience in the workplace, so that's something good to put on our resume. We have that experience that helps us in future endeavors, inshallah. And while you're earning your money, it's really important that, I wish I had, really thought deeply upon this when I was working as well. It wasn't too bad, but, I just wish I put more concentration in that as well, is that when you are working and you get that money, you're excited, right? Because as a youth, it's like, oh, it's my first paycheck. What do I do with this? You're overwhelmed, right? So a lot of people might, okay, I'm going to go buy those new Nikes. I'm going to go buy those new Jordans, or, I'm going to go shopping, or I'm going to buy that, or I'm going to buy this, right? Although it is important to, fulfill your righteous desires in that sense, to buying, what you like, it's also important as a youth to start saving up for the future, right? When you start saving from now, you're definitely going to see a positive impact of that saving in the future as well. A lot of wealthy businessmen, that I follow myself, people like Grant Cardone, like Ryan Serhant, if you follow these guys, they have this rule called the 40% rule, right? Which is that whatever you're earning, right, after you've earned, take out 40% to save, right? But don't just save it. Don't just let it be sitting in your savings account in your bank, and the bank is just going to keep taking interest every month from that. Take those savings, right? And with the appropriate guidance, with the appropriate training, right? And it's not going to happen just as once. Look at something to invest in, right? Instead of your money lying there, wouldn't you want to put your money into something else and let it appreciate, right? So that you're able to get more money. You're able to achieve more wealth from, for an example, getting, $20 in your bank account, leaving it there, and then you're going to have like 0.1% interest on that every month. Would you rather that happen, or would you rather have that $20 and it letting it increase in value through an investment, and then the next year you can probably see that $20 go to like $500, for an example, right? So this is why it's always important to practice that self-control, because once you have that self-control, you're not going to be spending lavishly and on things that you don't really need, right? That's very important for us as youth as well. Question yourself that though you may like it, do you really need that thing right now, or can it wait? All right, and that's all dependent on self-control, inshallah. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And also, one of the biggest things is having self-control over your anger, right? This is one of the most important principles and factors in our deen as well, right? Anger is the cause for many other sins and many other issues as well that we hear a lot, right? There's a very beautiful hadith here from Imam Baqir alayhi salam. This is from Usul al-Kafi in BAB al-Ghadab. He says, من كف غضبه عن الناس كف الله عنه عذاب يوم القيامة. Right? So Imam Baqir beautifully says here, whoever controls his anger over the people, Allah will control his adhab, or his punishment, for that person on the day of Qiyamah, right? So you kind of see like a cause and effect type of thing happening over here. That if you're controlling your anger over here, Allah is going to make sure that the adhab in the Yawm al-Qiyamah is going to be less for you. He's going to control his adhab for you in the Yawm al-Qiyamah, because as humans, we sin, right? So we want to make sure that we're not getting angry as quickly, right? We want to make sure that, obviously it's not to say, you know, turn the other cheek, because there are instances where you need to take a stand for yourself, right? Islam doesn't teach us that just to be madloom the whole time and, you know, just keep taking slaps from other people. No, it tells you wherever rightfully so, take a stand for yourself, right? Wherever you feel like your rights are being taken advantage of, you're being taken advantage of, stand up for yourself, but also through very rational and righteous means, right? It doesn't mean to just pick a fight with whoever it is, and that's not what I'm advocating over here as well, right? Because you see, when you start to grow in your life, right, when you start to further yourself in your education and your workplace, you're gonna have to deal with a lot of people who really test your patience, right? I've seen it a lot. There's gonna be so many people that are gonna test your patience, and it's just gonna drive you crazy, right? But if someone is fighting you with fire, you can't fight that fire with fire. It's just gonna become a bigger fire. It's just gonna ignite, and you're gonna see later on, it's like, wow, that was really stupid of me. Why did I get angry back at him or back at her? Right? You'll see if a person is dealing with you angry, but you're being calm and collected, you know, you're keeping your cool, that person will realize that them being angry at you won't really faze you, and then they're gonna feel really stupid about it at the end of the day. The purpose is not to make the other person feel stupid, but it's kind of to send them a reminder. It's like, hey, this conversation probably could have taken place without you being angry. You could have approached me being calm and collected. I would have been calm and collected, and, you know, you wouldn't have such a bad mood for the rest of your day, right? But yet again, it all goes back to your self-control, right? So you make sure you train yourself, right? You're gonna have to deal with a lot of these situations and people for the you know, later on in your life, and thus it's important that from your self-discipline, it's going to lead to that self-control, and within that self-control, you're going to be able to find that patience to deal with difficult situations, circumstances, and people, inshallah. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So today we went over the example of self-control, right? We said self-control is an important factor that we learn from fasting, obviously abstaining from your food, from water, and your sins. But it's also important in the practical world as well, because you'll see that's important for your studying habits. It's important for your finances, for saving. It's important for anger, for dealing with different people. And that's going to help you, you know, become better in communication and dealing with people as a general. And yet again, these examples are not separate from religion. They go hand in hand, right? These are the factors. These are all the elements and principles that are being, you know, advocated by religion. I brought this hadith up about, you know, anger, controlling your anger. I brought the example up with Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam, where he's controlling himself from those temptations, and he was a youth at that time himself as well. So that's something that we really need to learn as well, that these examples and these concepts are not separate from religion. They're being advocated by the ai am alayhi salam. They're being practiced by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the ai am alayhi salam. For what? For our development, our growth, our character, in order to become God-conscious people and having iman in the righteous sense, inshallah. Inshallah, in the next night, we're going to be talking about the last characteristic trait that we can develop from fasting and take, inshallah, a practical lesson from that, which we will be continuing regarding our topic as to why it is important for us to fast as youth. Inshallah, I pray everyone benefited from this. Everything good from this session was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything negative that came from it is from me. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد.